viewers, and welcome again to Discovering Truth, and I am Pastor Forbes from the Gateway Abiding Word Ministries here in the Gambia. We are now in part 3 of our series entitled Wholeness or Completeness. And over the first 2 episodes, we've defined, described wholeness and completeness as the state of not being hurt, the state of being integrated. We use the figure 1 as an integer. The state of being sound physically, mentally, the state of a restored and recovered position. Completeness, being unmodified, being intact, being entire, being unbroken, uncut, and being focused and concentrated in what you are about. And we are sharing these thoughts to encourage us all to seek wholeness, live in wholeness, because our thoughts are that it is from the place of wholeness and completeness or completion that we can bring our gifts, our skills, our abilities, our trainings, our dreams, and our visions to bear with a partner, with a friend, a business associate, a husband, a wife, siblings, etc., etc. And we tried last week to draw the life cycle of wholeness and completion. And I remember saying that when a couple decide to have a baby, and all things being equal, in an environment of love, of trust, of commitment, of passion, of humility, of belief in the goodness and the mercy of God, conception takes place, and the journey into birth takes place. As you know, for us humans, it's 9 months, 36 to 40 weeks, divided into 3 trimesters. And all things being equal, that journey is undergirded and nurtured by love, by care, by compassion, by fine dressing, by all kinds of things to give the signal to this young little one or little ones in the womb that they are about coming into an atmosphere of love, joy, good reception, and continuing something that would mold them holistically to not be fearful, fretty, timid, or intimidated in life, or to feel a sense of a lack in who they are, a discrepancy in their personality. But from before conception, gestation, birth, and thereafter, the naming ceremonies, the love, the joy, the decoration of the room, and everything, the dedication, the christening, and all through the stages that bring us into proper self-awareness, where we have chosen our line and pathway of profession, vocation, career, calling, where we trust our livelihood prospects are better, irrespective of where we are in the world. The undergirding thread must be wholeness. And we said that when we get to that point where we envision our goals and where we want to get to, and start thinking legacy, next generation and generations after us, we do that with a sense of wholeness. Ladies and gentlemen, the opposite would be almost bitterness, envy, hatred, malice, undermining, dissatisfaction, greed. We always want more. We are not satisfied with what we have, not properly but inordinately. Our eyes, what the Bible calls the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. We would always want more. But from that place of wholeness, and contentment and peace, and knowing that I can contribute without losing my individual uniqueness is where we want to get to. And then we said in that journey, each of us knows that we make friends. We attract friendships based on a number of factors. Whatever those factors are, and as many as they are, we attract friendships. Because remember last Tuesday, I told you in the first book of the Bible, in Genesis, when God created man, God said it's not good for the man to be alone. So God never recommends aloneness and loneliness. Somewhere in the Psalms, Psalm 68, it says God places the solitary people into families. And I remember talking about the African tradition where when the male head of a home passes on, there is a proxy, culturally understood head, with the import being that that family can never be left uncovered by a head. The family must have a head. And maybe there is also the female part of it, but the import will be the same, that no child, no family must be left or feel uncovered. There must be somewhere that they look to for leadership, for a sense of belonging, etc. Then we also said, in the English language, as you know, it is said that no man is an island. Then we qualified it with two scriptures, and I want to add a third one. So I'll go to the first one, because in friendship considerations, and by the way, we are building friendships, attractions, relationships, hopefully marriages, families, and the repetition of the cycle. And definitely we'll be touching the challenges in all these segments that add value to us being whole, because wholeness doesn't mean there's no challenge. Wholeness doesn't mean there are no setbacks. Wholeness doesn't mean there are no even self-inflicting pains or transition points for that matter. Because sometimes the end of a season and the beginning of the season are joined by a transition period. And if you and I don't understand that, we may just want to remain in the known, even though the grace, the strength, the energy, the love, the attraction of that phase has expired, and you need to get to the next phase and enjoy the goodness of that phase. And we'll come to all that, but we want to go through the cycle. So there is friendships. Friendships can be temporary, friendships can be long-term, friendships can be situational, but all friendships must be transformational. Whether they are temporary, permanent, situational, short-term or long-term, they must be transformational. So two people coming from the place of wholeness and completeness come together, they do business together, they share an apartment, they are millennials in a hotel room, a bed, they're in boarding school on a double bunk bed, wherever they are, there's just something that will rub off each other, and it's transformational. This is how the Bible puts it in the book of Proverbs, chapter, I believe it's 27 and verse 17. Proverbs 27:17 says, iron sharpens iron. You know, when you put two knives together or two metal pieces together and you hit them, they rub off, and sometimes there are even sparks. And that happens in relationships and friendships. But the end of it is that this iron is sharpened, that iron is sharpened, this friendship is sharpened, that friendship is sharpened, this person is sharpened, that person is sharpened, even though there are sparks. So friendships are supposed to be transformational. Friendships are a two-way street. Friendships are a give first and a take, not a take first. It's a give first. It's a give first. It's like one of the 4 laws of the 7 habits of highly effective people. I think law 3 or law 4 says, seek first to understand before you are understood. But if you don't seek to understand, you pre-conclude, you are prejudiced, you have already listened without hearing and concluded without knowing. So friendship is like that. It seeks to give out first, and in its giving, definitely it's going to receive. Sometimes in equal measure, sometimes in a greater measure. And should I add that even if it's in a lesser measure, there are other friendships that will complement for the bigger package. So we read Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 24 in the Bible last week. And I want to go back to it, and then I will make reference to the two other scriptures. In Proverbs chapter 18, verse 24, this is what it says. The person who wants to attract many friends must themselves be friendly. You wonder why people are not friendly to you? Maybe you should just check. Are you also friendly? Or are you a self-made recluse? Are you suspicious of everybody? Do you second guess everybody's motives? Do you add a percentage to everybody's greeting? Do you close one eye and try to zoom in telescopically on people? When you do that, you have blocked yourself from the freedom, the genuineness, the liberty, the openness, the simplicity, and the sincerity of people who want to become your friend. So sometimes when people say, as for me, I have no friends, it's almost a direct, proportionate relationship to the fact that they do not put themselves out there to be friendly. And people have all kinds of reasons. Well, I'm just not the type. I like to observe people from afar. I don't like people who just come into my space. There's a word called vulnerability. You cannot live on this earth without being vulnerable. Even when you think you have studied somebody very well, your husband, your wife, your business partner, if you're not vulnerable, you'll still be closing. And vulnerability even strengthens friendships, because I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to preserve. I have no skeletons. This is me. Or maybe I have skeletons and my friends know them all. So there is nothing. We just love each other despite the skeletons, in spite of the skeletons, and with the flaws and the faults and the skeletons. And that is when friendships go into permanence. So here it's saying that anybody who has many friends is friendly. So conversely, anybody who has no friends, we should be asking why. So it says the person who wants friends must also make themselves friendly. And then it qualifies it in verse 24b. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 24a I just read, and at the second half b. There is that friend who sticks closer than a blood brother. And I remember telling us last week that, your biological siblings, you didn't choose them. You came before them, after them, and if you're a twin, you came with them. So your brother is your brother. Your sister is your sister. Your twin brother and sister are your twin brother and sister. You can't do much about that. But friendship is about choice. You choose your friends. You choose your friends. And yet, the scripture is teaching us inherently, and we all know that some of us have friends that are even closer to us than our own blood biological siblings. It doesn't say that the blood biological siblings are evil, bad, aloof, uninterested in you. There's just something about that connection with a friend that makes them come closer than a brother. So you hear this phrase a lot of times. I hear it from my African American friends: my brother from another mother, my sister from another mother. It's not saying that your father or your mother cohabited with another man, so you are an outside child, or that person is an outside child. It's just that it's almost as good as we were birthed by the same parents. So you hear that phrase, my brother from another mother, my sister from another mother, my brother from another father, my sister from another father. That would be an apt description of the friend who sticks closer than a brother. Why? Because you make a lot of effort in that friendship, and you do not have to make efforts with your siblings. You live in the same house, you grew up together, you bear the same surname, you know everything. You went to school in the same taxi, the same car, you walked together. These are your siblings. And sometimes, fortunately, unfortunately, we take our siblings even for granted. And maybe rightly so, because they are our siblings. But for that friendship, we put in so much that it says there is a kind of friend who will stick closer to you than a brother. So friendships are deep, because sibling tightness is also deep. You know, you don't want to mess with siblings. They will gang up against you. You know, the junior sibling will call the bigger sibling. Twins will come together and descend upon you. So there is that tightness in sibling power and togetherness. They have their jokes, they understand their jokes, their eye moves, their contacts, they laugh. You know, you remember, I don't know what the children have nowadays, but in my days, way back in the early 70s, late 60s, going into the 70s, we had what was called Lakindongo. I don't know how many of my age mate, 60s going upwards, you should remember Lakindongo, where we use the words backwards, and I wouldn't want to try it now, you know, but you can try it where you are, and you can confuse people with Lakindongo because it's backwards. You know, mange em de, you know, mange dem, you know. So siblings have that bond, and yet there is friendship which can trump that. But to get that friendship, you yourself must choose to be a friendly person. Maybe I have time for one more scripture. I talked a bit last week about these two guys, Jonathan and David. Jonathan was the heir apparent to the throne of his father, King Saul, the first king of the Hebrew people of Israel. David was the king that God wanted to give them. So sometimes we talk about the perfect and the permissible. That this is the perfect, David, but the permissible is the one that you insist that you want, so you are given. But it's not the best. It's not really what we would have given you if you took your hands off and made us choose from a panoramic view. But when you insist, and you see that in decisions, in relationships, in choice of course studies, in all kinds of things, and we say take it. So for the Hebrew people, God's ultimate was David. His best was David. His first choice would have been David, because God called him the man after his heart, Dawda, David. But the people chose Saul. Now Saul became jealous and envious of David and tried to kill him. And his own son Jonathan, who naturally you would have expected to side his father, because when his father expired or abdicated from the throne, he would come to the throne. And who doesn't like to be king? Who doesn't want to be king? And yet Jonathan knew that God's best in that theocracy was David. And he became friends with David, much to the anger and maddening anger of his father, King Saul. He chose to befriend David. No strings attached. And there was even an imbalance in their friendship, because Jonathan had a lot of things, David had nothing. And they formalized their friendship by cutting a covenant. It's like signing an agreement. And in that signing, Jonathan took out his belt, his sword. He brought things to show that this is my commitment. And David had nothing. Yet, they had this bond. And because my time is up, I want to read this verse of scripture, and I'll pick up in part 4 from there. So it's 1 Samuel, the book of 1 Samuel, that is 1st and 2nd in the Old Testament, the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 18, and I read from verse 1. Now when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved David as his own soul. That the brotherly love was like brother from the same mother. We were birthed by the same parent. That's how deep the friendship was. Saul took him that day and would not let him go to his father's house anymore. Verse 3, then Jonathan and David made a covenant. I just said that because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan took off his robe that was on him, gave it to David with his armor, even his sword and his bow and his belt. 5 things. He gave him his robe, his armor, battle armor, his sword, his bow, and his belt. Would you do that for a friend? Because not all friendships are 50-50. I remember in my university days, I had this friend. We were just great guys. We would go to lectures together. He was doing engineering. I was doing biochemistry. He was doing electronics engineering. I was doing biochemistry. But we happened to be in the same hall. So we'll live together. And if I finish before him, I'll wait for him. If he finished before me, he'll wait for me. We'll eat together. And whenever we went to eat, maybe I will pay for lunch, he will pay for dinner. We traveled together to the nation of Sierra Leone in 1985. We came to the Gambia together, same year, 1985, and we are still friends. Still friends. In fact, when I was in college, my elder sibling said that I only know you for this one friend. We went everywhere together. And his money was my money. It didn't matter. He was Nigerian. I am Gambian. We didn't see any of that. Because there's a level of friendship where your friend sticks closer than even your blood sibling. I want to stop here and build up and just remind you that this level of friendship comes from wholeness. I'm not trying to get something for him, hoodwink him, con him, trick him, cheat him, abuse him, use him and dump him. No. I am giving and he is giving and the friendship continues. And on that note, I want to stop here, and next week we'll continue and move on into friendship and attraction, and gently, I said 6 parts, but I'm thinking it's going to be 8, 9, who knows, maybe 10 parts. It's not the parts that matter, it's how we can share and build quality lives together. Until I come your way next week, by the grace of God, this is Pastor Forbes saying have a good evening, or a good morning, or a good afternoon, wherever you are, and God bless us all.